Continuing to read from Dallas Pimiento, Book 1, Bronco, beginning with a piece called High Praise. Dallas Pimiento had the privilege of having a couple of his paintings examined by the noted professional artist Sam Corker. "And what is the title of this one?" Corker, his head involuntarily jerking up and to the right, as if writhing under the assault of some powerful stench, asked. Pimiento hung fire while he tilted the painting forward to read the title scrawled on the back in marker. "The Coming Digital Singularity of All Human Consciousness," he read with some embarrassment. His conceits, conjured up in the solitude of his studio, always seemed to him to fall flat in the face of strangers apparently more mature and practical viewpoints. Corker made no comment. He only made a sound like ah. Then he twisted up his head again and said, "Go back to the other one again." Pimiento obliged, shuffling the two paintings so that the other was visible. "And what was this one?" Corker sounded as if he was speaking through a fog of fumes. "My Oath Before the Ocean of Loss," Pimiento repeated the title mechanically. This was not as much fun as he had thought it would be. "Are these two the only two you have?" Corker asked. "At the moment, all the others were in a storage unit across town." Corker looked about the small studio. "How many do you have in the storage unit?" the noted professional artist and amateur detective asked. "I'll say it's got to be over 200. I'd like to see them sometime," Corker added quickly. His voice was not unpleasant. Pimento's hopes remained buoyant. Yet what exactly he hoped for was nebulous in conception. On paper it might look like future plans for lottery winnings or the promises of authoritarian religions. "Sure," said Pimiento, mentally stamping any such second meeting with Corker with a black mark of negation. Hopes remain buoyant when they carry no anchor. "Well, let's go outside for a minute," suggested Corker. In the tiny but well-landscaped garden around the studio door, Corker took a deep breath. "What a charming spot," he said. The big stapler. "I'll need a weapon," Dallas Pimiento told the LPM's armorer, Flip Shidwick. "What kind of opposition do you foresee in your upcoming assignment?" Shidwick, a middle-aged man who had in his youth been a dashing, handsome devil, was looking through a microscope. He rose and tipped his glasses from the top of his head over his eyes. "I really don't know," replied Pimiento. "Didn't read your case file, did you?" Shidwick's mouth flattened into a simper of superiority. "I looked through it," Pimiento protested feebly. "Going to wing it as usual, I suppose." Shidwick shook his head and started walking towards a padlocked cabinet. Pimiento followed. "Oh, Bronco, when will you ever learn?" The armorer removed a set of keys attached to a long brass chain from his pocket. "When will you start planning ahead, plotting out your assignment so that you achieve some worthy and foreseeable end?" He fitted the key into the padlock. Pimiento, who 10 or 15 years ago would have taken this admonition without a word, was by now an experienced operative, rightly proud of his accomplishments. He bristled at Shidwick's words. "I have my own methods, and I haven't done half bad by them," he argued. "If you say so." Shidwick opened the cabinet and began rummaging about inside. "But you could be and do so much more." Now Pimiento did remain silent. He knew better, but there was no point debating it with Shidwick. Pimento's philosophy, developed through years of both failure and success, was yet the natural maturation of a seed of a mindset he had always had with him. Shidwick pulled an item out of the cabinet and handed it to Pimiento. Then he turned back and began relocking the cabinet. "Is this what I think it is?" Pimiento asked, turning the weapon over in his hand. "The big stapler. That's right," Shidwick nodded. He turned back to Pimiento. "Now, if you'll give me half an hour, I can show you some pointers." Pimiento didn't know whether to feel insulted or privileged. He paid attention to Shidwick's lecture, however. Stolen milk crates. "Where did all these milk crates come from?" Dallas Pimento's father, visiting his son at the latter's workshop and studio, asked. "I found them behind various grocery stores around town," Dallas answered truthfully. "Found them?" Erskine Pimiento repeated. "Yes, found them. They belong to the dairy that has their name on them." The elder Pimiento pointed with the toe of his weejan at the warning stamped into the plastic of one of the crates. Dallas nodded, indicating that, although he had understood what had been said, he did not care. "You're going to get arrested again," Erskine intoned. Later Dallas would mimic this sentence in a voice totally unlike his father's, making the man sound old and out of touch with reality. I think not. Dallas, although approximately 36 years old, yet risked his father's wrath by talking fancy in this way. Later that evening, while going through the thousands of pieces of paper stored in the milk crates, Pimiento heard a knock on the door to the studio. "Who is it?" he bellowed in a threatening voice. "It's your daddy," came the reply. Dallas opened the door and saw Erskine Pimiento standing there in the dusk, holding a stack of cheap wooden vegetable crates. "What's this?" Dallas asked. Erskine stepped into the studio. "I've got some more in the truck," he said, setting the dog-eared containers down on the rug. "I don't want these." Dallas's eyebrows lowered. "I don't need them." "You can use these to store your stuff, and I'll take the milk crates back to the store," Erskine informed his son. "First of all, the store doesn't own my milk crates," Dallas began, with the least of his objections to the scheme. "Second, I'm not going to keep my important papers in some ratty old bushel baskets." He didn't mention that there was a third item, one at odds with his father's morals. "Dallas, I don't know where you get your ideas about right and wrong," Erskine's voice shook, "because you didn't get them from me." Wipe with a sock. To amuse his young cousin Fletcher, Dallas Pimiento, age 16, took a shit on the floor of one of the dressing rooms in a fancy department store at the local mall. The walls of the enclosure did not extend all the way to the floor, so Fletcher was able to watch the turds as they fell. Fletcher then saw a sock, soiled from being used as toilet paper, follow Pimento's waist, then another. These socks had been taken into the dressing room for just this purpose. To the young Dallas, it had been this forethought that excited him more than the thrill of fecally desecrating the dressing room. He faithfully included this detail when later relating the incident. Now, many years later, as he traveled by bus to the first needful stop on his assignment, he suddenly found himself imagining what it would be like to come across the turds on the rug, the new, unworn pair of socks beside them. Would he have been more upset if he had been an employee or some random customer? It was not that he regretted doing what he had done. I can't read that. After all this time, it was that he now knew that he no longer found it funny, much less took pride in it. He decided to stop telling the story, unless the situation really called for it. The smell of vitamins caught his attention. The seat beside him was unoccupied, as were the two seats across the aisle. He cautiously peered behind him. There sat an old woman. She was just recapping the plastic container. Pimiento turned back around. She had probably done things similar to this little incident in her life. No, she had probably done things similar to his little incident in her life, and most likely they had been done recently, not out of spite, but out of confusion. This thought, accurate or not, left Pimiento in a sour mood. When the bus stopped in Bruiserwood, Pimento's destination, he hopped up, grabbed his bag from the overhead rack, and headed down the aisle. He had no other luggage, something he was grateful for. The big stapler was in his bag, along with a couple of books, and he remembered to his amazement as he stepped down onto the concrete, a pair of socks. He turned back to the bus and waited to see if the old woman was going to get off. His wait quickly turned into an ordeal. No one else got off. He said to hell with it. He walked across the street to a Waffle House. In the restroom he found that some thoughtless jerk had left shit smears on the toilet seat. My crime was victimless in comparison, he thought. Noodles. The noodles came in a deep plastic bowl. There was a printed band of red and yellow roosters and cows running about the outside rim of the bowl. I found the design amusing and the noodles hot, spicy, and delicious. I ignored the chopsticks, grabbing instead a fork. I like noodles, I said aloud as I held my nose over the bowl. What you got in there besides noodles? My companion asked. Seasoning, I said it as if I were another man stating the name of some rare, beloved cut of meat. My companion was just about to tell me how he had to have some meat in his food, and exactly what kind he would prefer in his noodles if he had been eating noodles, when a young guy burst in through the front door of the converted warehouse where we sat. Come outside, everybody, look at this, he roared in his young guy's voice. Of course, several of those about me, including my companion, jumped up and ran out to see what was so compelling. To show whoever might be watching me that I was above such easy influence, I remained where I was, eating my noodles, but watching all the same, looking at the backs of the heads of the people outside as they stared at whatever it was. I must admit that, as the object of their observation seemed more than an immediately transient event, I bolted my noodles and rose to join the crowd. Pushing my way through with grunts of irritation, I reached the front line. I followed the upraised fingers of those about me to gaze at the fourth story of the building across the street, where I saw a slim young woman in a sundress standing on the ledge, backing away from a man in a hat. "You ignorant rabble," I growled as I moved forward. I crossed the street and began climbing the face of the building. "The power of the noodle sustains me." I clearly remember thinking to myself, "Would that I had had an egg roll as well," was something I added later in talking to the newspaperman who wrote of my rescue of the girl. Did you get a look at her attacker?" one asked. "No," I said. "As soon as I confronted him, he dived off the ledge, as you saw, and flew away using his arms as wings. What he had been eating, I cannot say. It may have been cold cereal." Side 2 already. "What more do you know about this Dallas Pimiento?" Agent Green asked me. I rubbed the corners of my mouth with thumb and forefinger. "Nothing except what I've read," I told him. "Which is?" Green's partner, Agent Lorne, almost barked at me. I glared at him. I'm not going to sit here and paraphrase a whole book and any commentary I might have read regarding it. I let him know exactly the score. I'm sure my eyes flashed. I never got to see the footage of my interview with the two agents, but the intensity of my eyeballing the agent must have been captured. "Mr. Ash, we can keep you here indefinitely." Lorne leaned on the back of a chair, bending towards me. "That's a lie," I said calmly, as if pointing out a bug on a potato chip someone was about to eat. My calm in such a situation, of course, would depend on who was about to eat the bug. "Mr. Ash," Agent Green interposed, "we have reached a crucial junction, a tipping point, if you will." I interrupted. "In our investigation. With your help we can complete our work and help make our world a little more secure." "Your world, perhaps," I said. "Mine is another story." "He thinks he can play games with us," Lorne told his partner. "I hate to do this, fellows," I said as I stood up. "Please remain seated," Green ordered. "But you've left me with no choice." The two men tensed. Was I about to become violent? Putting the fingertips of my left hand and right together, I made a snapping motion that brought the fingertips down into my palms, but pushed the thumbs out towards the two men. This is the sign of my curse. As I made the sign, I said the magic word, "library." Instantly, all three of us disappeared. The only one to reappear, however, was I. I reappeared in the comfortable chair at the Athens-Clarke County Library. "What happened to the two men?" my friend Speak's son York asked me at the conclusion of a retelling of this story. I had no answer then, and have none now. In glistening abandon. Bud Shank decided to save money by buying a case of honey buns from the grocery store instead of one at a time from the vending machine in the break room at work. True, they weren't Mrs. Bakersby's brand. They were labeled Happy Owl, but they were almost indistinguishable. Shank held one up to the fluorescent bulbs. The juice that the pastry was glazed with had puddled at the bottom of the wrapper, just like Mrs. Bakersby's. As he tore open the packaging, he wondered if perhaps there really had been a Mrs. Bakersby. Probably not. But with a name like that, you would almost have to get involved. With a name like that, you would almost have to get into the baking business. Before he threw away the wrapper, he looked at the name of the company that manufactured Happy Owl brand buns. It was the Grosvenor Baking Company, located in the next town down the road, Giverton. How odd. A product from the area. And he was consuming it. He had forgotten who Mrs. Bakersby's was manufactured by and where, though he had read the information often enough over his years at the lab. Shank glanced at the vending machine. He would have to wait until someone else bought one. Then he would read their discarded wrapper. He put that on his long-term mental memento slate. He had just turned his attention to the book he was reading, Valuable Suggestions, when a girl who worked in the dung room approached him. "Hi," she said. "Excuse me, but do you know where Seth DeMoom is? Is he sick?" Or she ended her question by rolling her hand around towards infinite options. Shank burped silently. "I really don't know," he said. "You're good friends with him, aren't you?" she asked. Shank paused. He held the last 2 bites worth of honey bun in his right hand. With his left he held his book. "Yeah," he nodded, his tone indicating, "Yeah? So?" "Well, I just wondered. I didn't know if he was sick or anything." She backed away. Shank saw her off until she turned around. "Damned spy," he thought. "I can't trust anyone around here now." He went back to his reading, but couldn't concentrate. "At least I can still eat when paranoid," he said to himself as he stuffed the remainder of his treat into his mouth. 11 Kisses. Ruth walked without significant tiring to the home of her Aunt Vera, her mother's sister. The house was 20 miles from the warehouse she had quitted, yet she made the trip in less than 2 hours. She rang the doorbell. "Ruth!" Vera's hand went to her throat in shock at the sight of her niece. "Where have you been?" She pulled Ruth inside. "Rebecca had the police looking for you." "She did?" Ruth asked. Her face was red from the sun. Now that she was inside the air-conditioned house, she did feel the effects of her long, rapid walk. She felt somewhat weak. "I need to sit down," she said. "Sure, sit," Vera began, but stopped when she noticed Ruth's legs. "Ruth, your legs! What happened?" "A miracle, Aunt Vera." Ruth's eyes teared up. "Praise Jesus," Vera whispered. "A medical miracle," Ruth continued. "Oh." The older woman's mouth turned down at the corners slightly. "A wonderful doctor named Seth DeMoom grew my legs back." "Grew them back?" Vera repeated. Ruth's eyes closed. She opened them wearily. "I'll tell you all about it," she said, "but can I get something to eat first?" "Sure, honey. You stay right there." Vera darted towards the kitchen. "No, I'll come with you. I'll sit at the kitchen table." Ruth stood up on quivering legs. "You're sure?" "Yes," Ruth nodded. "I need to call Rebecca," Vera said as she opened the refrigerator. "I'll call her if you want." Ruth sat down. A large cat padded slowly into the kitchen. "Here, girl." Ruth leaned over and patted her new left leg. It felt strangely firm and alive to her. The cat came to her. "Her name is Bailey, right?" she asked. "That's right." Vera picked up the phone and dialed. Ruth picked up the cat and cradled it in her arms. She talked to it softly until Vera handed her the phone. "Hello," she said. "Ruth." Rebecca's voice was like an alarm clock. "Where in the world have you been?" Thimble. This is where it all starts to come together, thought Thimble. The organ music in her headphones mingled with the sounds of some commercial on ESPN to make a singular occurrence in the history of music. I had always thought red beans and pintos were the same thing. Technically, read a reference book she consulted, a pinto is a horse. "It's a car, too," Thimble's mother told her in a rare display of surrender to the spirit of discussion. "I smell pizza," said Thimble aloud, though she knew as soon as she had said it that she had exposed herself to ridicule. "Well, there isn't any," Thimble's mother let her know. "A fly smelled pizza, too." Perhaps Thimble's mother smelled it as well, but she never let anyone know if she did. The fly, a big one, had no one he needed to confess his perceptions to, however. He merely began circling, trying to get a fix on the exact location of the food. "It's a fly," Thimble squealed. "It's a big one," Thimble's mother added. "Funny how you can still make fun of the Irish." "I'll release the anti-fly." Thimble headed for the activation control. "I wish you wouldn't." "What?" Thimble demanded, so foolish was the objection. "Oh, go ahead." The anti-fly, a small aircraft, tiny really, zoomed out of its container high up on the wall. The noise it made was much louder than that the fly made. A trail of stinky gray smoke lingered in the air from its flight. "Analyze that fly's flight pattern," barked the commander on duty in the anti-fly. "Doing it now," responded the data chief. "I said now," the commander rebarked. "I am." A drop of sweat started down the data chief's forehead. "There's no time for your fumbling inadequacy," the commander screamed. "Attack the fly now." He ordered the boys at the grappling board. "Blind, sir?" one questioned. Thimble's mother, tired of waiting, smashed both fly and anti-fly with what she still called the flit. And, let's see here. We will stop there for today.